Carioca is a Brazilian noun or substantive used to refer anything related to the city of Rio de Janeiro, capital of the homonymous state in Brazil. The original word, carioca, comes from the indigenous Tupi language meaning white man's house. It is said that the first Portuguese dwellings in Rio de Janeiro were placed along a limpid stream, which was soon adapted into Portuguese as carioca. The demonym meaning for the state of Rio de Janeiro is fluminense, taken from the Latin word flumen, meaning river. So, for instance, someone from Niterói is both fluminense and niteroiense, while someone from Rio de Janeiro is fluminense, and also carioca. While a carioca is someone who was from Rio de Janeiro, a carioca da gema means someone who was born in the central area of the city of Rio de Janeiro, mostly the neighbourhoods of Zona Sul and Centro. The term was originally created out of prejudice against the cariocas from distant and poor neighbourhoods. On the other hand, those same victims of prejudice adopted the term to refer to someone born in Rio de Janeiro, but whose parents were necessarily also carioca. In the same way, it conveys a bias against descendants of immigrants, mostly from the northeast of Brazil. Rio de Janeiro is an ethnically diverse city by the standards of Western global cities. The last PNAD census numbers for Rio de Janeiro are 8,576,000 white, 5,376,000 pardo, 1,920,000 black and 128,000 Asian or indigenous. The last PNAD census for the city of Rio de Janeiro is 3,193,588 white, 2,244,997 pardo, 809,463 black and 75,887 Asian or indigenous. Like other Brazilians, cariocas speak Portuguese. The carioca accent and sociolect are the most famous of Brazil, in part because Rede Globo, the second largest television network in the world, is headquartered in Rio de Janeiro. Thus, a lot of Brazilian TV programs, from news and documentary to entertainment, feature carioca acting and speaking talent. Accomplishments and influence: Carioca people have invented a few sports. The most famous is futebol. Cariocas are credited with creating the bossa nova dance. Famous cariocas in English-language film include Brazilian bombshell Carmen Miranda. An eponymous song from 1933, Carioca, has become a jazz standard. Sociolect, the Portuguese spoken across the states of Rio de Janeiro and Espírito Santo, as well neighboring towns in Minas Gerais and in the city of Florianópolis, has similar features, little distinctive from each other, so that cities as Paraty, Resende, Campos dos Goitacazes, Cachoeiro de Itapemirim, Vila Velha and Linhares may be said to sport the same tone together with Rio de Janeiro, as they will hardly be perceived as strong regional variants by people from other parts of Brazil. The Brazilian Portuguese variant spoken in the city of Rio de Janeiro is called carioca, and it is called sotaque locally, a word literally translated as accent. It can be said that Rio de Janeiro presents a sociolect inside the major fluminense capixaba tone, as speakers inside the city may be easily recognizable more by their slang than the way the phonology of their speech, closer to the standard Brazilian Portuguese present in media than other variants. It is known for the first place of diffusion of several distinctive traits new to either variant of the Portuguese language, most notably, for Brazilians, coda and can be pronounced as palato alveolar, e florinand, e, such as those of English, or alveolo-palatal, e, and e, such as those of Catalan. This trait is inherited from European Portuguese, and Carioca shares it only with Florianopolitano and some other fluminense accents. In the northern tones of Brazilian Portuguese, not all coda and become post-alveolar Euro rhymes do not, for example. For Europeans, as well, what would be coda in European Portuguese, may be realized as various voiceless and voiced guttural-like sounds, most often latter ones, and many or most of them can be part of the phonetic repertory of a single speaker. Among them the velar and uvular fricative pairs, as well both glottal transitions, the voiceless pharyngeal fricative and the uvular trill that is, x, e pound, I, e, h, A section and euro. This diversity of allophones of a single rhotic phoneme is rare among not just Brazilian Portuguese, but also among major world languages. For both, originally probably from Tupi influence, through the Portuguese post-Creole that appeared in southeastern Brazil after the ban of Língua Geral Paulista as a marker of Jesuit activity by the Marquis of Pombal, the consonants and before or final unstressed /e/ become affricates, te florin te and dada, respectively. This is now commonplace in Brazilian Portuguese, as it spread with the bandeiras paulistas, expansion of Mineiros to the center-west and mass media. It is not as universal in São Paulo, Espírito Santo and southern Brazil, even though those were populated mostly by the original bandeirants because the Europeans immigrants learning Portuguese and their descendants preferred more conservative registers of the language, perhaps as a mark of a separate social identity. For both, historical that merged with coda in Caipira, had gone labialization to la, and then vocalized to e. Nevertheless, with the exception of be the one used in southern Brazil and São Paulo instead of e, both commonly transcribed as w. This process is now nearly ubiquitous in Brazilian Portuguese, so that only some areas retain velarized lateral alveolar approximant or retroflex approximant as coda. These traits, as a whole and consistent among the vast majority of speakers, were once specifically characteristic of Rio de Janeiro speech, and distinguished particularly from the pronunciation of São Paulo and areas further south, which formerly had adapted none of these characteristics at large. The chiado of the coda sibilant is thought to date from the early 1800s occupation of the city by the Portuguese royal family. More recently, however, all of these traits have spread throughout much of the country due to the cultural influence of the city, that diminished the social marker character the lack of palatalization once had. As said above, affrication is today widespread, if not nearly omnipresent among young Brazilians, while coda guttural is also found nationwide, although to a way lesser extent among speakers in the 5 southernmost states other than Rio de Janeiro, while if tone is a good social indicator, about half have a tone that consistently palatalizes coda sibilant in some instances. Another common characteristic of Carioca speech is, in a stressed final rhyme, the addition of before coda. This change may have originated in the Northeast, where pronunciations such as Jesus, EZUJS have long been heard. Also from northeastern Brazil and Spanish immigration comes debuccalization of coda sibilant, for example mesmo, memu. Albeit it is assumed for many Brazilians that this is specific to Rio, in the Northeast debuccalization had long been a strong and advanced phonological process that may also affect onset sibilants and, as well as other consonants, primarily, v. There are some grammatical characteristics of this sociolect as well. An important one is the mixing of second-person pronouns voca and tu, even in the same speech. For instance, while normative Portuguese requires li as oblique for voca, and te as oblique for tu, in Carioca slang the once formal voca is used for all cases. In informal speech, the pronoun tu is retained, but with the verb forms belonging to the form voca, to foi na festa. So the verbal forms are the same for both voca and tu. Many Cariocas, as well as many Paulistas, will shorten voca, using car instead, car vi pra casa agora. This practice, however, is only on the spoken language, it is usually not written this way. Slang words among youngsters from Rio de Janeiro include caraca, now spread throughout Brazil, or, and quala copyright co-copyright, and Mineiro and Sinistro. Many of these slang words can be found in practically all of Brazil, due again to cultural influence from the city. Much slang from Rio de Janeiro spreads across Brazil and may be not known as originally from there, while those less culturally accepted elsewhere are sometimes used to shun not only the speech of a certain subculture, age group or social class, but the whole accent. See also, Caipira, Mineiro, Gaucho, Carcamano. References. Bibliography, Bizel, Lida, Introdução a Picavolta a Estudos de Fonologia do Português Brasileiro, Editora Edipix, ISBN 85-7430-529-4.